Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Patty Bryant, and with Learning Reinvented, I live in Denver, Colorado. And recently, I jumped off the cliff into freelance. And, you know, something that I really believe is that, you know, we don't have to be alone. Look at all of us as freelancers. There's a whole wealth of knowledge and information out there and wisdom. And so I really feel like we can leverage an entire community. We actually get to choose the team that we're on because we can work with each other. And so one of the things that I really want to focus on is doing things that I'm uniquely great at, and then also to learn from you guys, you know, what are you really great at and what questions do you have? And then I can say, you know, things like, hey, I've never done this before. Anybody have any suggestions? So I'm just hoping for a community where we can really get to know each other and, you know, come together like this, share what you know, and then learn from others. So when we're not here, we can keep up with each other on LinkedIn, and I've got a group on there. If you're not in a group, I'll talk about that towards the end, but that's where I'll post the announcements of like topics for every week and speakers, and where we can, you know, just keep up with each other throughout the week. So that brings us to today. We've got two awesome presenters, and the first one is Christy Tucker. She's going to talk about how to find clients. And then the second one is Shannon Connor, and she's going to talk about the essentials of beginning a freelance career. These were topics that were actually selected by you guys. So some of the members went online and filled out the survey that I asked, and so these are going to be right up our alley. I'm super excited. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to pass this over to Christy in just a second, but I just want you to know that if you have questions as Christy is talking, feel free to type those questions in the chat area, and then when she's done, that way we don't interrupt her, when she's done, then I will you know, bring up some of the questions and she can answer, and, you know, maybe we can even answer collaboratively some of the questions, and then we'll move on to Shannon. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Christy, if you'd like to go ahead and share your presentation, then we're ready for you. Perfect.
All right.
We can see it.
My name is Christy Tucker. I've been doing freelance since 2011. I worked as an instructional designer. Been working in online learning since 2004, so a little over 10 years now, and freelance for 4 years. So I'm going to start out my presentation by saying that I don't actually do a lot to actively seek out clients, and most of what I'm going to talk about today is how I actually do find clients, which is not a whole lot of, you know, cold calling or cold emailing or any of that. It is, for the most part, that clients find me, and that has been my experience. And so I'm going to talk about how it is that I actually do that. Plus, at the end, I'll have a little bit more on some more direct methods. But so the first thing that I think is required for when you're doing freelance, if you're just making this leap, or you're really getting, maybe you've had that one first project and you're trying to get started a little bit more to turn this into a full-time job, you need to have a portfolio. You need to have an online website. I don't think it has to be. It doesn't necessarily have to be super elaborate. If you have 2 or 3 short samples. Most of what I have in my portfolio is actually screenshots. It's not actually full interactive examples, because screenshots is kind of what I can get permission to do on some of these things. But I think you need to have some example of what your stuff looks like. I also think you need to have some explanation of what it is that you did with that. What problem were you solving? A couple of sentences of why did you make the choices that you did? Why did you pick this example? Why is this example a good sample of the kind of work that you do? And you can talk about what tools you use to do that, because It's not obvious to a client necessarily which tool it is, but that helps them understand that. I'm sure portfolios could be a whole other topic for some other day, and I'm sure there's lots of people who could talk about that. But I think that this is a mandatory thing. If you're in that position many of us have been in, where everything you've ever created belongs to some company, the answer is that you need to create some samples on your own. Do something on time management or project management or some generic business topic. It doesn't have to be a full course. 3 screens is enough to have a demo, but you need to put those things together. And so I think that's kind of your first step. The second step on how I find work is through networking. And when I say networking, I don't want you to envision the going to those mingling events where you shake everybody's hand and you hand out business cards or resumes and you hope that somebody calls you someday, and you're talking to all people who are hoping the same thing, that you're going to call them. That's not what I'm talking about. I think of networking as building and maintaining a relationship. A lot of the work that I have comes from previous companies I've worked for, or people who used to work for those companies who now work somewhere else, who I've kept in touch with. I worked at Cisco before I became freelance. I worked at Cisco. Cisco, if you've paid attention to the news, has had lots of rounds of layoffs. So I know a lot of people who used to work for Cisco and who now work somewhere else. And other, vendors that I worked with when I was at Cisco, and those people, and because they know that they worked with me before, and because I've kept in touch with them and I am still active in their minds, that they do reach out to me. I literally, about 2 months ago, had somebody contact me who I was on a committee with at my first instructional design job in 2004. And he is now at a different organization and contacted me. And I think you want to be the kind of person that people want to work with again. That's part of it. But maintaining those relationships is also part of it. The other part of networking is networking with other freelancers. We all have those times where we get a little overbooked and we've got to pass something off to somebody else. And I try to refer those to other people to spread the wealth and to share those things. And that also means that people come to me when they're overbooked and they've got overflow work, or they need some help with a project, or it's oh my gosh, somebody just bailed on us and we've got 2 days to turn this around, can you come help? And I'm hoping that this group will be a place to do some of that networking too, where we can help each other out with some of that overflow where you get overbooked and things. But networking with other freelancers is definitely one of the strategies that does help me. And just always keep in mind with the networking, if you approach networking with the attitude of, I'm thinking about what I personally am going to get out of this relationship, if I'm coming to it because I need you to give me something, it's probably not going to be as successful as if you approach networking with the attitude of what I can give other people. Excuse Cat, who's decided to join our conference call. Who thinking about what you can give to other people, thinking about sharing your expertise, of sharing articles of, oh, hey, I remember you talking about this problem, and I just saw this. This might be interesting to you. Thinking about those sorts of things, I think karma sort of does kick in then. If you give a lot, somehow these things just end up kind of coming to you. Next way that I find things is social media and online communities. I've been blogging for coming up on 9 years now. And the way that most clients actually find me is that they find my blog, they use my blog to go find that links to my portfolio, and then they contact me through my portfolio and website. And that I've had multiple clients tell me that that's the way that they found me. So being active and publishing on a blog, on LinkedIn Pulse, on somewhere, establishes you as an expertise, and it makes it easier for clients to find you. And part of the goal is that they should be finding you and realizing and that they can find you and see the kind of work that you do. If they hate the kind of work that you do, you know, I do lots of things with scenario-based learning and storytelling, and that's a lot of what's in my portfolio. If there's a client who's exploring instruction designers and hates the idea of doing scenario-based learning, they're going to look at my portfolio and they're never going to even contact me, which is good, because then I don't waste time talking to somebody who's got a totally different philosophy and approach. And I think having that and being who you really are and not trying to be everything to everybody is important. Online communities, LinkedIn groups. I know LinkedIn's in the process of changing groups, and we'll see how that all falls out. But I certainly have found LinkedIn groups to be helpful in the past. The eLearning Heroes group, the eLearning Guild Learning Exchange is still a pretty new group, and it's not real active yet. But I think it's on the way, and there's potential there. LinkedIn groups, again, the idea of what I talked about with networking is thinking about what you give. If you can be helpful and answer other people's questions in any of those forums, there's a Reddit forum for instructional designers too, you know, and whatever that online community is, and being helpful does make it so that, again, people see that you are helpful and that you know what you're talking about. I literally got a $16,000 job because I was helpful to someone in a LinkedIn group. It was not actually the person that I helped who gave me the job. It was a third person who saw that I was helpful and who said, oh, well, this person actually knows what she's talking about. Let's go contact her. And so I got a huge project because I was helpful in a group. And again, that karma does just kind of seem to work. My third kind of big strategy, this is sort of the theme of the last 2 points too, is to be a good neighbor, online or in your, if you're in your local ATD chapter or you go to conferences or whatever. Share the stuff you know. Share when you create some cool little interaction or you figure out some problem. Share the stuff that you're doing and be a good neighbor. And it may seem counterintuitive that, you know, giving away expertise ends up with people paying you for your expertise, but it does seem to kind of work that way. And I think when you, again, approach it all as, how can I be out in the community and sharing and helping out other people, helping out other freelancers, helping out clients, that is actually a strategy for finding clients. So not that there's, you know, never any, not that there's never, you know, anything that where I, you know, directly do stuff. I have directly applied for jobs that were posted in LinkedIn groups or occasionally for other things. I do reach out to people I have worked with in the past to say, oh, it looks like I'm going to have some open time in January. Do you have any projects coming up? And I do those things too. That is kind of under that category of networking. But for the most part, 90 or 95% of my work really does come from those strategies of networking and social media and being a good neighbor. And people come find me, and that is how I'm finding things. For a little bit more reading here, two different sources here. Jenny Van Nice's her strategy is very much like mine, of you go out there, you be active in the community, you be a great person to work with and easy to find, and somehow all the people just come to you. And her strategy is very similar. So if you're looking for kind of that strategy of things. Ashley, I'm going to mispronounce your name, but I'm going to try, Shasung. Ashley on her blog has posted several things about her freelance journey, and I definitely recommend, if you aren't reading her blog, go read it and go find her posts about this one about finding the instructional design jobs, where Ashley's approach, she did some of those more direct, you know, literally researching people and cold emailing. She talks about the bid sites, and Ashley talks about both what worked and what didn't work. The sites like Elance, which is now Upwork, and I think freelancer.com, and some of those things, Ashley talks about that some of those got a few things forward, but not great. But she talks about how she used Craigslist. I don't think cold emailing or cold calling is that effective of a strategy overall, unless you do the kind of research that Ashley talks about in her post. I think when you do it that way, you can do a little bit more. I see that Ashley just posted that she's no longer doing that cold emailing now because she's gotten established enough, which does not surprise me. If you're trying to break into the market, doing some of that research and cold emailing as a starting point to just get started makes sense. But I think that Ashley's stuff, and obviously we'll watch for when she does her updated post about what she's doing now. But that, I'll post these links in the LinkedIn group so you can go read the post. And that's my strategies for finding clients.
Awesome.
So I wasn't really watching chat, but
yeah.
Patty, were there other questions about that I can answer?
Sure. So you guys, if you have more questions right now, go ahead and chat them. Karen asked, who do you use as a host for your website or portfolio? So do you have any thoughts about that?
So I think WordPress. Okay, my very first version of my portfolio was a single page off of my free WordPress blog, which will work, and it's totally free. I do recommend, if I could go back 9 years now and redo it, I would have registered for a domain right at the beginning of the process and used that for my blog and then built my website from there. As it is, as it is now, my portfolio is somewhere else. I use DreamHost. Bluehost, I think, is good. WordPress has a lot of free templates that are designed for portfolios. And so the one that you saw in mine, where it is all those little thumbnails and stuff, I did zero coding for that. That's all in a template where it's just adding the images, marking them as the featured image for that, and it'll create and tagging those posts as portfolio posts, and it'll just create that thumbnail page for you with the read more link, so it creates that nice grid and it goes out. There's several of those templates that you can do. So if you can find cheap hosting and the cheap domain registration, and then do something like that, I think WordPress in one way or the other is probably the way to go. There's a couple other, I see a couple other people talking about self-hosted WordPress or free WordPress. The one problem with free WordPress is that you need, if you're doing Flash files, you can't host those directly on WordPress, so you have to find somewhere else to host them and link them, but there are ways around that. It's probably a more detailed discussion than we want to do today, but maybe we can talk some more about that on, there's probably a good LinkedIn discussion where we can talk about the strategies and what people are working. How do I answer the question of how long does it take to create 1 hour of e-learning? I think that that's a whole other presentation. But generally speaking, if I get somebody, if somebody contacts me and literally just asks me the price, I tend to give them a ridiculously wide range. And I just told them your 1 hour of learning could take between $5,000 and $100,000. And so let's talk more about the details so I can give you a better estimate. I have some rough formulas. I use Brian Chapman's numbers, and I do some of that. So that's part of my, I refer them to some of those benchmarks. I definitely send people the link to Brian Chapman's stuff on how long does it take to create e-learning, or the ASTD research, the Carl Kapp and Robin DeFelice from 2009, that research. So I'll do some of those things. I kind of have some benchmarks, so I sort of know where my formulas are. So other questions? I don't want to take up too much time. I know I'm over 15 minutes now.
Oh yeah, I'm keeping track of our agenda there. No worries.
Okay.
Yeah. So if there's any other questions, let us know. Also, if anyone has any other suggestions of how they find, freelance work, and they would like to share that, feel free to speak up or put it in the chat. So I'll give you a minute if there's any other questions or any other suggestions.
And Sean, I don't think that was a mean question at all. I think that's a real question, because it's really the stuff we have to deal with, and you need to have a strategy of what do you do. And I will say, it used to be that when I'd get people who would start out asking price, that I would try to get them on the phone and try to convince them of how awesome I am and how much value it could be, and try to explain why it takes $10,000 or $20,000 to build an hour of e-learning. I have cut back on some of that, and then it's partly because I have discovered I was spending way too much time talking to clients who don't have anywhere near the budget to do the kind of e-learning that I do. That they really need, and you know what, if the answer is that they really only have $1,000 to spend, there's not a whole lot I can do for them. I mean, and sometimes with the low budget, I will then do all right, if you've got $2,000, here's what can be done within that $2,000 budget. Maybe it's not an hour course. Maybe we do a 15-minute course and we do something else. And so I think that's one. I mean, I can do that sometimes, but honestly, when I was tracking my numbers, I track all of my activities and try to, improve what I'm doing. And when I was looking at my numbers for last year, I had spent so much time trying to convince people who were just looking for really low-level, quick, tweak the PowerPoint kind of e-learning, not looking at really business results and not looking at anything more. And I'm not interested in doing that kind of work particularly. I try to be out of the commodity part of the market. And so I should have just screened them out faster. So giving people a range at the beginning tends to screen out the ones who, I had somebody ask me to do stuff that literally would have worked out to be $5 an hour. And it's like, well, and it was, he'd paid somebody on he'd found somebody on Elam to do it for really cheap for him, and then the courses he got were terrible, and he was unhappy with them, and so he came back to me to improve them. And it's like, well, if you have $150 per course to work on it, there's not really there's not much I can do to help you. So I think that's also part of the finding clients thing, and maybe a broader topic of you do have to say no to people too. And that's a hard thing when you're just getting started. It's hard to do that. It's good to be in the position where you can start saying no. I mean, if you need to pay your mortgage, you take whatever job you need to do. And there is no shame in taking a job so you can pay your mortgage or you can buy groceries. And don't get me wrong there. But the goal is to try to get to the point where you can turn down the jobs that aren't a good fit. Yep, I like Ashley's point there of don't include the work that you don't want to work on in the future. In your portfolio, you build the stuff. So.
Yeah, that's a very, very good suggestion. There's a lot of really good suggestions in here. Back to that, how does everyone else get find freelance work or find work? Ant suggests using the word consultant. I like that. But basically, e-learning heroes, Tammy suggested that. That is a great place. They post all kinds of different projects on there, on the e-learning heroes website, asking clients for referrals. That's really great. Yeah, so there's a lot of really great stuff in here coming in the chat. Okay, well, it's about time for us to go ahead and shift over to Shannon. Christy, thank you so much for your incredible wisdom. Everyone, let's give Christy a round of applause, whether you want to chat or just thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. I'm glad. I feel kind of honored to be the kickoff presentation. There was a little bit of pressure here of being the first person. So thanks all and good comments and questions in the chat.